This video is brought to you by WeGotSoccer.com, offering all the latest soccer gear at everyday low prices. Don't forget to use coupon code SR4U at checkout for 10% off any order. Hey guys, Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com, bringing you this week's Question of the Week video. And before I get started, if you're not familiar with Question of the Week, it is a weekly series that goes up every weekend on my channel, where you guys can ask a soccer shoe related question, anything you want about soccer shoes. Leave a comment down below, and whatever question I see is the most reoccurring or question that I think is a really good question, I will pick it and use it in next week's Question of the Week video. It might be one really big question, or maybe a couple of small questions that I can kind of break up into one video. This week is going to be a bigger question, but if you do have one that you would like to get answered, like I said, go ahead and leave me a comment down below, and perhaps it will be featured on next week's Question of the Week video. Also guys, if you guys could like the video, letting me know that you guys support these types of videos really does help me out, and I really would appreciate it. But as far as this week's Question of the Week video, I'm going to be talking about sizing and soccer shoes. I get a lot of questions, tons and tons of questions about sizing, and if you ask me, sizing is by far the most important aspect of a soccer shoe. If you've ever read any of the reviews on my website, you see that the longest section of my review is generally about the fit of the shoe, simply because that's just so important. And it's not only about buying the proper size, but it's about matching a shoe fit with your actual foot type. A lot of people have issues with their feet being too wide or the feet being too narrow, high arches, low arches, and it really does depend. You have to match your feet with a soccer shoe that's going to be appropriate in terms of fit. Not everybody's feet can fit into every single soccer shoe, but just as you can see, I'm in my socks right now, so I kind of want to give you a little bit of a show you my feet at least, so you can have kind of something to go off of. I'm pretty much a size 9 in pretty well everything, and that's a really tight size 9, which you guys will see right now when I kind of start putting shoes on. I like my shoes to fit very tight, no room at all in the toe box, and I'll explain why that is later. As far as the width of my feet, I have about a normal width foot, ever so slightly on the narrow side, I guess you could say, but fairly flat feet, and I tend to have pretty narrow heels as well. I don't know how great that you guys can see that on camera. So I generally tend to fit in every soccer shoe, like I said, and I'm almost a 9 pretty much across the board. But of course, sizes do vary, and fit really does vary from shoe to shoe, especially when you go from brand to brand. So again, I'll talk about that a little bit later, and we'll get started. Alright, as you guys can see, I have two different shoes on my feet. On my right foot I have the Nike Tiempo Legend 4, and on my left foot I have the Adidas Predator LZ. And the reason why I did pick these two shoes is they tend to be pretty popular at the moment, and they have different fit characteristics that I really would like to talk about. On my right foot, like I said, the Tiempo Legend 4 is a kangaroo leather soccer shoe that does have some stretch to it. And there's a huge misconception with leather soccer shoes as a whole, is that they're going to stretch to fit your size. That's almost never the case. A shoe like a Copa may do something like that, but as a whole, especially modern leather shoes, do not stretch in length. They'll stretch a little bit in the width, and the toe box will expand a little bit, but you're not going to get a half size of difference after the shoe is broken in. So don't size a half size down. A lot of these leather shoes, at least the good ones anyways, are designed to fit tighter out of the box. So a leather shoe, in theory, should fit a little bit tighter out of the box than a synthetic shoe will, simply because that leather shoe is going to stretch, whereas the synthetic's not going to stretch. So having that tight fit from right out of the box is very normal, and don't size down to where they're way too small. Just get your normal size so they're snug, and they will stretch to fit your feet, so you'll have a more relaxed fit. This is a brand new pair of Tiempo Legends. I've only got about an hour use into them, so they're not fully stretched out exactly as to how I would want them to, but they're in the process of getting broken in, and you can see that my foot fits very tightly and very snug in here. Probably a little bit more tightly than I would want them to, but again, they're not broken in yet. They're going to give a little bit, and eventually I will have that more comfortable fit. But as far as the sizing and the length is concerned, my toes are right against the end. There is no room whatsoever, and ideally that's how you would want to wear your soccer shoes. You don't want that extra space in the toe. And before you guys go and comment, I'm growing still, I need some growing room in my shoes. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But ideally, if you're not growing anymore, you really should look at buying a shoe where you have no space in the toe whatsoever. Having that perfect fit, you're going to get a lot better durability out of your shoes, simply because if you have that extra length in your shoe, you're gonna end up kicking the ground a little bit more, whether you realize it or not. Your toes are gonna drag, and that's where you're gonna have issues with the sole separating from the upper. So very important to get a proper fitting shoe. And what's another thing I get a lot of questions about is wide fit. I have a wide foot and I don't fit in a lot of shoes. You generally want to stick to shoes that are leather, simply because you're going to get a little bit more stretch out of them. And you want to stick to shoes that are going to have a central lacing system. Reason being is that a central lacing system generally tends to go a little bit deeper in the shoe, and it allows you for more customizable fit. When you have a shoe with laces to the side or something like that, or even synthetics, they have a predetermined shape. So if your foot does not match that shape, you're generally not going to be able to get a good fit no matter how tightly you pull the laces. So having a shoe with the central lacing system just allows for a more customizable fit, and generally allows for a wider foot to fit into the shoe, simply because you can pull the laces out a little bit further. On my left foot I have an Adidas Predator LZ, which again is a very popular shoe as well. This is a full synthetic, and it has a little bit of stretch to it, especially probably one of the more stretchy synthetics on the market, if you want to say that. You can see it has formed to my foot a little bit, but overall the fit is really nice and tight. As you can see, again, there's no room at the toe box whatsoever, but if you want to compare the two shoes, you can see that a synthetic does not stretch or fit to your foot exactly like a leather shoe will. You can see the differences in the toe box, especially on the instep here, where the Legend does look a little bit more foot-like. You can see that this LZ does kind of have a straight angle there on the inside, which is not ideal to what you would want. That's my knuckle there, you can see that. And then it kind of cuts it off, pushing my toes in a little bit. Not to where it's uncomfortable, but you can see that as a whole, synthetics are not going to be able to fit as nicely as a molded leather shoe. But that's pretty much it as far as comparing these two shoes, and we'll go on to the next two. Alright guys, the two shoes I have on my feet now are arguably from one of the most popular categories of shoes, and that is the lightweight shoes. Everybody's going crazy for the shoes that are getting lighter and lighter, but just keep in mind when you buy lightweight, there are some downsides and some restrictions as far as fit is concerned. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this segment. Obviously on my right foot I have the Adidas F50 Adizero My Coach in leather, and on my left foot I have the Nike Mercurial Vapor 8. But when it comes to lightweight shoes, generally they have to make that lightweight happen through the outsole or the sole plate of the shoe, and the only way to make it more lightweight is to make it more minimalistic. And to make things more minimalistic, generally they tend to get narrower, especially with soccer shoes. So you tend to have that much narrower midfoot in these lightweight speed boots than you would in a shoe that weighs 2 or 3 ounces more. So if you do have wider feet, it's generally best to stay away from the ultra lightweight shoes, simply because they generally tend not to be that wide. But again, something like an Adizero in leather is something that you can get away with as far as having a little bit of a wider fit. But as far as the Nike Mercurial Vapor 8, this is a shoe that I get so many questions about. People are asking me all the time, I have wide feet, am I going to fit into the Vapor 8? And my direct answer to that is no. If you've ever read my review on this, I was pretty explicit on saying that this is a pretty narrow fitting shoe. They've changed the shape from the past couple of models, and the Vapors from, I would say, about 4 to 7 were not all that wide, were not all that narrow. They got a little bit wider, or from 3 to 1 they were very, very narrow shoes. The Vapor 8's kind of gone back to that narrow style, that narrow shape anyways. And you can see, you guys saw my feet barefoot, and these shoes are laced up as tight as possible, and you can see that the side walls of the shoes are almost on the outsides of the tongue. There's not a lot of extra room as far as width, allowing for width on your foot. So if you have a wider foot, I would definitely stay away from the Vapor 8. You're just going to cause yourself grief with discomfort. They're never going to fit right, and having that synthetic upper means it's not going to stretch at all. So if they don't fit right from right out of the box, they're never going to fit right. Don't force yourself into a shoe. That means you're just going to cause yourself trouble in the end. If you look at the Adizero in leather here, you can see that the laces are pulled a little bit tighter, and there's a lot more space as far as width in the shoe. I could have a significantly wider foot and still fit comfortably in the shoe, especially having this leather section at the front that's going to stretch quite a bit, and it has almost overstretched, I would say, for my foot type, which is probably why I'm not the hugest fan of this particular version of the Adizero. It just doesn't tend to fit my foot all that well. The synthetic one fits a little bit better for me, simply because it doesn't stretch as much. But having that extra room at the front there where you can stretch, where the shoe can stretch due to the leather, does allow for a little bit of a wider fit. Also keep in mind that lighter shoes tend to not be as durable. So if you don't have the proper fit in one of these shoes, and like I said, if you have that little bit of extra room at the toe and your toes are scraping against the ground, whether you realize it or not, you're really hurting your shoes from a durability standpoint, and you're going to significantly lessen the life of your shoes if they don't fit properly. Again, I'll show you guys the fit on these. No room at all in the toe. My feet are completely there. There's no extra room in the shoe, especially if you're buying high-end shoes, guys. Please get the proper fit. It's so important. There's no reason to buy a high-end shoe if they're going to fit too big. It's just not worth it. I realize they're a little bit expensive, but if you're buying a shoe that fits too big and spending a lot of money, I don't want to say that you're wasting your money, but you pretty much are. As far as the Adizero here, I have a little bit more room in this shoe, but this is kind of more down to preference rather than what's fact or not. Having a shoe with zero space to the toe is my personal preference, but having just that little bit of extra wiggle room around there, if you do like the double sock or something like that, having that little bit of extra room, very little bit, like less than like a quarter of a thumb length, that's no problem. Again, that's down to preference. Not something that I like to do, but you can get away with that. But that's pretty much it as far as the lightweight shoes are concerned. I just wanted to show you guys these two shoes side by side. Alright, the last two shoes I'm going to show are the Adidas Adipure 11 Pro SL and the Mizuno Supersonic Wave 3s. And in this part of the video, I want to talk a little bit about growing into your shoes or buying your shoes to grow into them. And if you're buying high-end shoes, part of the reason why you pay that extra money is to have a tighter fit overall. So to buy a high-end shoe with a lot of extra room in the toe almost makes no sense. Like I said, you're pretty much wasting your money if you are doing that. These are two shoes that fit a little bit longer than I would personally like to have, but as far as growing room is concerned, I wouldn't recommend getting a shoe that's any bigger than this, especially if you're buying a high-end shoe. You can see on the Adipure here, there's a little bit of extra room. I would say about half of a thumb length around the toe box, but the sides of the shoes still fit relatively tight. A lot of people buy shoes where it fits just way too big overall. They have a lot of room in the toe box, a full thumb, and then there's some room here on the sides. I don't have that on this shoe. You have just that little bit of extra room. Again, the upper is always going to stretch a little bit, especially if it's a natural upper. And then on the Supersonic Wave here, I have about the same fit. Again, I have that little bit of extra room at the toe, and then it still fits pretty snugly in the forefoot, which is really, really important. If you don't have that snug fit in the forefoot, you're never going to have the proper fit. Another thing I want to talk about as far as buying a shoe that's too wide or too narrow, if a shoe you put on and is the proper size in the length, but is just not wide enough, never, ever, ever go up half a size to satisfy the width of the shoe, because then it's going to end up being too long and you're never going to have the proper fit. You just have to come to that conclusion that some shoes fit wider than others, and if you do have that wider style of foot and you don't fit in a particular shoe, you just don't fit in that shoe regardless of what size it is. If it doesn't fit in your normal size, don't go up half a size just to force your foot in the shoe, because you're never going to have the proper fit. Go for something that's going to fit you properly. But alright, there are two main things that you can kind of mess around with to try and get the best possible fit out of your soccer shoes, and that is insoles and socks. And what a lot of you guys don't see in my reviews, or what I really don't cover in my reviews and I can't cover, is how I mess around a lot with the insoles. The full review is written with the stock insoles in the shoe, so don't worry that I'm not reviewing the shoes with the proper insoles. But when I first get shoes, a lot of the times they tend to fit either super snug or a little bit too big, or for whatever it may be. Swapping out the insoles is a really big factor as far as how your shoes are going to fit. For example, a shoe sometimes comes in and it fits a little bit too tight. For example, the new ACC Laser, I felt like it fit a little bit too tight, and you have this thicker, more padded insole in the shoe. So what did I do? I threw in something a little bit more minimalistic, like a mercurial insole, and my foot fit in there a little bit more snugly. I didn't feel like it was too tight like it was with that insole. Wore them for a couple hours until they finally got to break in a little bit, and every shoe will give a little bit, and then threw the old insoles, the original insoles, back in the shoe, and I had no issues with discomfort. So I avoided that kind of more uncomfortable break-in process just by swapping out the insoles. A lot of the time the opposite thing can happen. Like sometimes insoles just tend to slide around on certain shoes depending on what the surface is under the insoles that they're sitting on. So sometimes swapping out an insole, like the Mercurial insole again for example, tends to be pretty slick on the bottom. I find that it slips around a little bit, especially on the Vapor 8. So swapping them out with something a little bit more, with a little bit more kind of tread on the bottom, I guess you could say, is going to allow for the insole to not slide around as much, and may allow for a little bit better fit. Just play with the thickness and thinness of the insoles, and you're going to notice that you're going to have a little bit better fit. If you feel like your shoe's got a little bit too much room in it, just throw in that little bit thicker insole and see how it fits. And if a shoe does fit a little bit too tight, especially from brand new, throw in a thinner insole until you feel like the shoe has stretched a little bit, and then throw the original insole back in, and you'll avoid a lot of discomfort and hopefully get a better fit on your shoe. The next thing I want to talk about is socks. And there's a lot of different things that people do with socks. I'll start off with a sock like this. This is an Adidas sock, and it tends to be a little bit thicker. It has kind of padding around the heel, toe, and cushion foot area, the footbed. And I'm generally not a big fan of having thicker socks. A lot of people do like wearing them. Again, that depends on how much room is in your shoe. The way I wear my shoes, I like to have as thin of a sock as possible. But again, a lot of people like to wear a little bit thicker socks. Some people even like to wear double socks. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Again, it's all down to preference. Play around with this. If you feel like your shoes are moving around too much, try a double sock, try a thicker sock, and that might solve your issue. Another variation on socks could be a really thin sock like this one. This is obviously an ankle sock I have here, but very, very thin. And another thing with breaking in shoes or having a proper fit is don't practice in ankle socks. Ankle socks always tend to slip down at the heel, and then you're going to be bare skin against the heel of your shoe, and that's going to lead to major blisters. So if you avoid wearing ankle socks, you're going to avoid a lot of blisters. But thinner socks are generally something that I like to wear, trying to feel as close to barefoot on the inside of the shoe as possible, but still have that little bit of a barrier from avoiding any kind of rubbing with the thinner sock. There's also some kind of hybrid socks like these new ones from Nike here that are really nice. I actually really do like these, where they're thin where they're supposed to be, and then the kind of the more pressure points like the toe under the forefoot have that little bit of extra padding as well as the heel, so you're going to avoid having any kind of discomfort while still maintaining that feel of a thin sock, which is something that I really like. I'm a big fan of these socks. There's just a little bit more money, so keep that in mind. The last kind of solution, which is kind of the end-all be-all, the best solution that you really can do if you really want to solve your problem once and for all, is go for a pair of True socks. They feature these little pads on here. I'll leave an annotation to the kind of my review video of these things. They really do work. They do a good job of gripping your foot and gripping the inside of the shoe, and kind of allow for a more one-to-one feel where your shoe's going to move exactly with your foot, and it's going to eliminate any kind of slippage inside of the shoe. A lot of guys are wearing these, including professionals. A lot of you guys have worn them as per my recommendation and are really loving these things. They swear by them. So if you haven't looked into these, like I said, there'll be an annotation on the top left corner. Go ahead and check out that video, and trust me, you'll love them if you do buy a pair. That's pretty much it for this week's Question of the Week video. Hopefully you guys have a better understanding of how sizing in soccer shoes should work. Let me know in the comments down below any questions you guys have, either kind of for clarification on this video, because I'll answer those right away, or if you have any questions for next week's Question of the Week video, just go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Again, guys, be sure to like the video, support these types of videos. It really does help me out. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.